Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Adwa, sorry for the late submission. So today I'm going to present some research articles regarding my research entitled Governance and Accountability Mechanics Employed at Local Government in Malaysia. So in these slides, I'm going to present two articles using two methods. The first one being qualitative methods, and second one is using quantitative methods as part of the research methodology. So the first article is titled Determinants of Public Sector Accounting Reforms in the case study as a case study of Sri Lanka. And in this article, it was published. This article was published in 2019, where the authors is D. Silva, Lokua Duje, and Keshara. And the method employed in this qualitative research is the case study and documentary analysis. And it is using archived documents from the Ministry of Planning and Finance, Sri Lanka, as well as the State's Accounts Department documents. And the objective of this research is to extend the new public financial management, the NPFM concept, and the contingency model approach. So this is the first articles that I'm going to talk about, and the next article where it is using the quantitative method. I'm using the article New Public Management Reforms in Europe and Their Effects, where this article is published in 2018, and the authors are G. Hammerschmidt, S. Van de Waal, R. Andrews, and Syed Mustafa. And the method employed in this quantitative research is a survey, and the respondents are the top executives in central government ministries and agencies in 20 European countries. And the objective of this article is to assess the impact of the new public management style reforms in these 20 European countries as perceived by the top public sector officials. So the hypothesis that was discussed in this article, the first article, the qualitative article did not come out with the hypothesis proposed, but the quantitative research came out with 6 hypotheses. The first one being downsizing of public sector will be positively related to the efficiency improvements. And the second hypothesis is where agencyfication will also be positively related to efficiency improvements in the public sector. Contracting out will also be positively related to efficiency improvements. Hypothesis 4 is the treatment of service users or the public sector service users as customers will have a positive relationship with all dimensions of public service performance. And flexible employment practices in the public sector will have a positive relationship with all dimensions of public service performance. And the last hypothesis is managerial reforms in the public sector will have a stronger positive relationship with overall public administration performance than the structural reforms. And the research framework employed in these articles, in the qualitative article, the independent variable is the adoption of the new public financial management, and the dependent variables what they are going to discover in this research is what are the determinants of a coal-based accounting standards adoption. And in the quantitative article, the independent variable employed is the aspect of reforms in the new public management, and the dependent variables is the perceived performance improvement in the public sector itself. And the results in the first articles is that they came out with the result that in developing countries like Sri Lanka, the public sector faces practical problems with adopting reforms. So there are lack of training, there are lack of skills in order to adopt the goal-based accounting in the public sector. And nevertheless, the significant policy changes towards the adoption of these international accounting standards have gained quite a big momentum over the last decade in Sri Lanka, while the other economies in Asia are still studying the process. In Malaysia itself, we are still going towards adopting the public sector accounting reforms, which is the accrual-based accounting. But Sri Lanka had been step forward. Where they have quite a big step in adopting the public sector accounting. This is mainly because they had quite big foreign debt, and this is where IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank, the Asia Development Bank had make it make it necessary for them to adopt the public sector accounting in order to give a more transparent and more transparency in the financial information. That is why the findings of this research shows that Sri Lanka had very has moving fast towards the adoption of the public sector accounting compared to the other economies in Asia, such as Malaysia itself. And in the quantitative research, it was found out that the top public officials in Europe associate the new public management forms with improved public sector efficiency. So most of the respondents, most of the top public officials views that the new public management had bring a greater efficiency in the public sector itself. And also, the main thing is the treatment of service users as customers alone is strongly related to improved public administration performance overall. So the most important thing in moving towards the new public management, about the idea of the new public management, is where the customers of the public sector must be treated like the customers of the private sector, where their services must be prioritized in order for the public sector to have a better new public management reforms. And in the first article, in the qualitative article, Determinants of Public Sector Accounting Reforms in Sri Lanka, this study may inform institutional policymakers and public sector accounting practitioners that the factors regarding the factors that must be considered, that worth considering in the adoption and implementation of accrual-based accounting practices in the developing country with limited resources. So like Sri Lanka, they have limited resources, they have large foreign debt, and they may lack in skills in order to adopt these public sector accounting reforms. But nevertheless, they still can move forward towards implementing this public sector accounting, and this may give a view and a lesson to all other countries, especially developing countries, that it is possible for the government and the public sector to move forward accrual accounting and moving behind the cash accounting that had been practiced all this while. And the limitation of this study is that this research are limited to an analysis of accrual-based accounting practices in the Sri Lanka public sector for only last 3 decades. The research may have contributed to Sri Lanka public sector, and other researchers may want to investigate more on the other developing countries that may not have the large foreign debt policy. Like I talked before, Sri Lankan may be moving forward towards maybe already have a large steps towards having public sector accounting reforms, towards adopting accrual-based accounting, because of the requirement of the IMF and requirement of the Asian Development Bank. In order for them to in order for them to gain a larger funding from these institutions, they must be presenting the information in the accrual-based accounting. So future research may have to take a look at the developing countries that does not have a large foreign debt and see how does this correlate with their development in moving towards a public sector accounting reforms, especially in goal-based accounting. And the contributions of the quantitative research, the new public management reforms in Europe and their effects. This study provides an in-depth perspective on how top public sector executives perceive the impact of NPM-style public sector reforms on a number of performance dimensions. So this is where this article interviews all the respondents consist of the top public sector officials in Europe in order to see how they perceive public sector, the new public management reforms contribute toward the performance dimensions with the cutting costs, efficiency, and so on. And how does NPM helps the public sector to achieve all of these perceived performance improvement. And however, the research only have findings upon only conduct research in European countries, and for the research might want to interviews the top public sector officials in other continents, in the Central Asia and so on. So this is where the future research may conduct. And the role of theories in the qualitative study, such as the first article, which is the determinants of public sector accounting reforms in Sri Lanka. The theory act as inquiry in order for the reader to understand in order for the researcher to understand the social phenomena through the exploration and interpretation of through the exploration and interpretation. So this is where the theories help in order for the researcher to justify the social phenomena, the environment of the research in order to come up with the theory that will correlate with the phenomena. And in this case, in the qualitative article, it brings the contingency theory, where in this research it was said that there is two contingent variables. There are two types of contingent variables that affect the public sector accounting reforms. The first one being the internal contingent variables, where the organization's environment, organizational structure, and technological strength may be part of the key contingent determinants for an institution to adopt to reform the accounting of the public sector. For example, like we said, when there's a good system, there's good financial accounting system inside the institution, it might help the institution in order to adopt an accrual based accounting system. And the next type of the contingent variables that may affect the choice of public sector accounting reforms is the external contingent variables, where there may be market pressure, new technology, political and legitimacy pressures in order for them to adopt. Like we're talking about the Sri Lanka itself, like I said before, they have large foreign debt from IMF, from the World Bank. So this is where these funders require them to adopt and to implement and to present a more transparent financial information which is usually relates to and this transparent financial information would require them to present their financial information using the accrual based, and this is where the need motivate them in order to adopt this kind of public sector accounting reforms. And the role of theories in a quantitative study, it acts as an inquiry based on testing a theory composed of variables. So this is where they have a theory and they are going to test the theory using the variables, and where will be measured using numbers and analyzed with statistical procedures. This is where this will help to determine whether the predictive generalization of the theory hold true. So in quantitative study, they have theory that is going to be tested, and this is where they collect data, they analyze the data and came up with predictive generalizations of the theory, whether the theory is can be supported by the data or not. And in this case, in this article, the new public management reforms in Europe and the effects, a structural equation modeling process had been undertaken in order to see the linkage, the theory on how does perceptions of NPM link with the perceived performance improvement, and they are using a structural equation modeling in order to see whether the theory that the perceptions of NPM link with the improvement do relate to each other. And in my study, the governance mechanics employed in a local government in Malaysia, as I browsing through the articles that related to these topics, the most I would say the most common theories that came out in the articles are usually the first one being the institutional theory, which is in this theory it states that organizations may change and adopt the norms of society in order to appear legitimate to that society. So in order to equip themselves with the environments, in order to be legitimate, so these organizations, these public sector organizations may change and adopt the norms of society. And this is where in this institutional theory also says that organizations are both, they are influenced by the society and they also can influence society in which they operate. And the motivation for change in the public sector in internal practices might be to bring or to maintain the legitimacy of the respective organization, or they call it as social contract. So what motivates them to change is actually in order for them to bring or maintain the legitimacy of the environment, or to maintain the social contract that they already have, or in order to build the social contract between their surroundings. And that's why many public sector entities are currently undergoing significant reforms. But as what did motivate them to do these reforms, maybe not to achieve a greater economic efficiency, but in researchers, they found out that these changes that they had adopted, maybe for the purpose of legitimizing themselves to different forms of institutional pressure or influence. So they have all kind of pressures surrounding them. They have pressures from, like we said before, the Sri Lanka have pressures from the IMF, from the World Bank, from the Asian Development Bank. So all these pressures, and they also have pressures from the society, that the society want to see the asset and the liabilities of the government. So this is where, in order for them to be legitimate to the society, they have to do the reforms. And most likely that these reforms are not really because of the great economic efficiency that they want to achieve, but more to in order to appear legitimate to their surroundings. And the second theory that usually relates to the governance of the public sector is the public choice theory, where this theory states that the government should bring small government. So government does not only have to be operating just among themselves, but they should be bringing the small government. They should be privatizing some activities to another sector, to the private sector. This is where they call as a small government. And also in this theory, it was said that the market principle should be adopted in their remaining scaled down operations. And after they had outsourced all kind of operations that should be outsourced and privatized, the remaining operations that conducted by government must be market-based, market principles, where they must be cost efficient, they must be maximizing their output. And this is proposed by this theory can be achieved through the privatization of the government business enterprises, as well as outsourcing activities. Like in Malaysia, like in my institution itself, we do have parking. We 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 did parking management where people have to pay a parking fee, and as we analyze that the parking management activity does not really brings like income, a big gain, a big revenue, or a big surplus to us. So we consider of letting private sector to handle the parking management. So this is where one example of outsourcing in the public sector. And in the public choice theory, it also came out with that business methods adopted are not only to achieve greater efficiency but also to curtail the size of governments. So when we are talking about outsourcing the government activity, um, uh, efficiency, the increase in efficiency may be another outcome of the business methods adoption. But the more important thing is that the size of the government had been curtailed. So when the privatization had been adopted, the size of the government will not we didn't call it shrink, will be curtailed, and then the cost of the government, the cost of operating the government activities can be minimized because of the outsourced activities. So this is where um, two theories usually related to the study in the public sector and the new public management idea. So that's all from me. Thank you.